Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and in this Brady Bunch picture we have right here, I see our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
And this may be different, so I may be pointing in the wrong direction because it's probably different for everybody. But I also have Amber Pierce, Cannondale's Amber Pierce, and also TrainerRoad's.
Hey, guys.
And we have our head coach down below here, Chad Timmerman. What's up, Chad?
Hi, everybody.
It's
Chad,
been a morning.
So I don't know if you've met Amber Pierce, but her last name is Pierce.
That was an honest mistake. I did know her before she was married.
No,
That's right.
I usually
Chad and
say
I go way
Amber
back.
Reyes. I usually say Reyes in my
So
head
do I.
and switch it to Pierce.
And I didn't want to say that and plant that seed of confusion.
For sure. As we're talking about something that actually let's not even wait for this. We're talking about Beers with Chad. So on Fridays at 2 p.m. Pacific, we have Beers with Chad now on Instagram, and you can join us live on Instagram there. It's super fun. You can ask any questions you want, but and then basically the premise, Chad cracks a beer, but you're going to actually get to pick this week which beer Chad drinks. He'll have some options, and based on everybody's decision, then Chad will drink that beer. Cracks the beer. We answer some questions, and then once the beer's done, it's over. So it's a quick little happy hour, Friday happy hour. Good opportunity for all of us to get together.
Just a fun little way to connect, yeah.
It's
And
so fun.
If you want to, it's a little dangerous. I'm terrified.
You should be.
So it's live then, and then it will be on our account for 24 hours, and then it's gone forever. So you have 24 hours to watch it, but we're not going to repost it for legal reasons. It's just not good to have a trail of stuff like that. And I like how we've had our biggest launch ever, and I like, nope, let's talk about Beers with Chad, because that's way more...
So yeah, we're
More
gonna
fun.
get into we definitely deviated off of our line here, but just the same. One thing with the Beers with Chad thing, I ask you to bring your most vexing questions, and I don't mean the ones you submit to this podcast. I mean all the ridiculous ones you've ever wanted to ask Chad or about bikes. Like, let's keep it like nice and fun. We can make it different than the podcast. Anything you guys want, any questions about anything,
Yeah,
it's
just
all.
Try to get
off
me on the
limits.
back foot, throw me off balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Chad was pretty smiley by the end of that, too. What percentage beer was that? 13%?
13, that was a huge mistake. Probably should have started a little easier than that, a little lighter.
Came in hot. So, but you should join us once again, Beers with Chad. Just go to Instagram and look for TrainerRoad. If you don't have Instagram, I've seen people saying like, I don't have Instagram. You totally should. You can just do the Coach Chad thing. Chad has an Instagram. Chad does not use Instagram except for Beers with Chad. So you can do that same exact thing. You can just join with Beers and Chad or Beers with Chad. You don't even have to post anything. So anyways, check that out. But once again, like you said, Nate, we've had the biggest launch probably we've ever done. I was telling everybody that they should stay tuned to our YouTube channel for a reason. If you didn't do that, you should still subscribe, check it out. We have videos coming out every day. But the reason for that is because we had a huge product launch, and that was group workouts. Super exciting stuff. Nate, I'll let you kind of go straight into things here.
Okay, so this is group workouts. This is something I've wanted to do since 2011, which is pretty crazy. But we had to do a whole bunch of things in front of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Sorry, Chad. Sorry, Mav. Sorry, Goose, I mean. My flow is gone. Okay, so
Sorry.
we were originally planning to get this launched in the fall, and we had like a proof of concept in last fall. But then the COVID-19 thing happened, so the team got together, and they worked so hard. And I've been saying we got this out in 10 days, but they've corrected me. We got this out in 9 days. And what you could do is you could do a workout together online, sharing voice, video, and data. All the workouts are scaled to your fitness level still, so it doesn't matter how fit they are. And you can, the experience is, it's so amazing that one, you're more likely to show up. Two, in the middle, you're less likely to quit in an interval. And three, the time goes by a lot faster. And the RPE, like, you can actually dig deeper than you can without it. And it is like, just, we've had some people on the forum say, oh, I would never use this. And they try it and they're like, okay, I'm only doing this now. So it is such I know this is coming from me, so take it with a grain of salt, but it's such an amazing experience. There's different ways to do TrainerRoad. This is my favorite by far. So how you do it right now is you just take, you go, it's only a desktop at the moment, and that's a laptop. And what you do is you start a workout, and there's a little button called Group Workout, and then that gives you an ID. And you share that ID with your friends, and they can join. At the moment of the recording of this podcast, we're limited to 5 people, but we're working on some things to up it to 11, maybe more. So if we get that through and those efficiencies through, it should be really, I mean, it'd be really fun to go more people. So we did this in 9 days. There's a whole bunch of things that we can do to improve it, but and we haven't planned. But this is just like the very beginning. And if you've heard me say on the forum, like we're working on thing 1 and thing 2, this is actually thing 2. So thing 1, actually Amber's working on that. Some people are like, oh, it's got to be Amber's thing. No, Amber's working on thing 1. So we'll see when that comes out. But this is, I don't know. It's really going to change pretty much everything on training. Like all of our failure rates internally, once we get some more data, we're going to see what the failure rate for people are in a group workout versus not. And I think what we're going to see, at least with my experience and everyone I've talked to, you're going to fail a lot less.
So yesterday I was doing a really hard workout with a multi-time Xterra age group world champ, I think, right, Nate?
Yeah.
Matt
national for sure, maybe once world.
At least once.
Only one.
Yep. Yeah.
Whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Is that all you can find?
Yeah. And then Brandon, which one of our product managers here, who if people know Brandon, we've talked about him plenty of times before, but he's an athletic specimen, right? Like extremely, extremely fit guy. And all three of us are going through this workout, encouraging each other, going through the whole thing. And then afterward, the first one, Matt was like, there's no way I would have finished that. No way. Like after 2 sets, I would have been completely done. Then Brandon was like, halfway through the first set, I almost quit. Like, but just having us there. And then we made it through, like, I think it was all 6 sets, right? Sure. You know, we were pretty ragged, but we did it. And it was totally within our grasp. It's just many times when you're training alone, it's hard to have that motivation. And I think it's super helpful when you can have that other person there to get you past your own personal barriers and reach that point where you actually start improving physically.
The cool thing, it gives you like 2 extra clicks of like HTFU. And normally, like you're like, well, I could do this outside, but if Jonathan were to do this with Brandon and Matt, like they're both faster than him, and like maybe you're the same as Matt, but you would not have been able to be actually with them, right?
Yeah.
So you'd have to find someone at the exact same power to weight ratio for you for it to work, for you to get the right workout. The other cool thing about this is when you're in the group workout, there's not a winner or loser. Like you all win, right? You do it, you do all the intervals, and you support each other. And that's a really cool thing that I love about the TrainerRoad community and on the forum. It's a really supportive place, and people like. It doesn't matter what your power to weight is or what your wattage is. We're all having the same shared experience, especially when it's scaled to you. We're all hurting the same, right? It doesn't matter if your FTP is 80 watts or 400 watts. It hurts exactly the same. And that's a really cool experience to share with someone. And, you know, it's weird, but I feel more connected to people, even with users, when I do it because you're like suffering together.
Yeah, totally. No, it's amazing. Even when we were testing it internally, we kept seeing people post about new PRs that they were setting in their workouts just because they were on a group workout and digging that much deeper because there were other people there. And it's so motivating when you know you're not the only person hurting. And it's like, okay, well, they're not giving up on this interval, so I better not give up on this interval. And then they're thinking the same thing. And there you go. You're just digging a little bit deeper. It's awesome.
It's surprisingly tremendously effective too, because I mean, if you harken back, this is where it all began. The indoor classes worked so well, and I got personally so fast, and my riders got so fast, I think largely because of the group dynamic. Give all these people these same workouts, send them home and tell them to do them on their own. You know, some people would not maybe do it as well. All of them would get marginally faster, but man, everybody in that class improved. I improved, and it was something to look forward to. It wasn't something to begrudge and get through.
Yeah, and I really like Nate's point about the fact that, you know, if you're outside on a group ride and you're going up a hill, I mean, that's a great interval, right? But if you get dropped from the group, it's kind of demoralizing. It's not the same thing. And this is an opportunity to ride with people that you wouldn't necessarily normally ride with. And everybody's there the whole time. And you're just pushing through every interval all the way to the end together. And it's surprisingly powerful.
John and I are doing a double date on Saturday where our wives are riding with us. And normally, like, I would not be able to ride with my wife because she would drop me on the hills. But, but now I can.
Her power to weight ratio is insane.
Yeah, we're about the same. She's like 4 watts per kilo, and like, I love you, wife, but clipping in is still a challenge because she just trains inside. But this is kind of cool. We get to all ride together.
For
That's
sure.
awesome.
Yeah. It's so we've been doing a ton of workouts together like this. I've seen improvements. I've been able to get through workouts that I didn't think I was going to get through. And Nate, I was one of those people right before this where I was like, yeah, cool feature, definitely going to be helpful. But for a person like me that's so intrinsically motivated, I don't need it, right? Like that's like what I thought. And then once I got into the workouts, I was like, oh, wow, this is hugely helpful.
Yeah.
So it's really helpful. A couple questions, I guess, Nate, that I've seen from a few people, and we can probably answer them right now. And probably
Can I put something else to that before we go?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you look at my Strava, Nate Pearson,
Oh, yeah.
you can see that I fail a workout very, very, like, not very often, like every 2 months. So I too thought like I'm intrinsically motivated, but turns out I'm not, or at least I'm not fully, because if there's other people there, even if you're doing all of them, personally, I don't really care. Like business-wise, you can use either product, but for racer-wise, as long as you're not in Northern California and in the Masters 35 plus,
very specific group.
Yeah, those people this doesn't work for. But for everybody else, it lowers your RPE, and by having a lower RPE all the time too, for me, it's allowed me to do more volume because I'm not trying as hard all the time. So I almost feel less tired too, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I one of our stats said I did like 14 or 18 hours in a 7-day period, which before 8 would kill me, right? Like it's crazy. And that did kind of kill me, but I'm excited about the extra volume. Another cool thing that we're doing is internally we have a group ID. So once you do this ID for a workout room, it's there forever. And we have one at Pettit, and at 6:45 a.m. Pacific time, we can all just join it. And then we start at 6:45, and who can join shows up. That's a good like team thing. And why it's Pettit +1. We do that every day. That one has a couple sprints at the end. It just gives us a little bit extra volume. So we've talked about adding extra aerobic volume inside of that. And you can do Pettit. And if it's too hard or it's too early in the morning, you just touch it down a little bit. But getting that extra hour in the morning, it almost feels like you haven't worked out yet when you do it. Mm-hmm. And you just get that extra hour, which is really cool. And then you do that over a week, and you're like, wow, I just got 5-6 extra hours, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 extra calories burned. You can do them fasted. There's a lot of cool stuff about it. And I would never, ever, ever get out of bed at 6:45 in the morning to do a workout if it weren't for everyone else who's waiting for me.
Well, I'm on Eastern time, so I got to take advantage of that in a different way. So I got on a little bit early, did a set of intervals for 45 minutes, and then jumped into the Pettit group. And that was awesome because it extended my workout. I got almost 2 hours. It went by in a flash. And that extra hour with the group was awesome. I never would have done that. If I were just by myself. I would have just done my intervals and been done with it. But then I got this extra hour of really nice endurance work, great company, and it was the best way to start the day. It was awesome.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. Some questions, Nate. Firstly, how do I find people to ride with? That's a question that I see from a lot of people, whether they, a lot of people say, I don't have any friends. That's probably not true. I bet you do have friends. But people are saying basically, how do I find a person to ride with?
Yeah. So if you do not have any friends for real, first make them join. Two,
and we're here also for that, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll be your friends.
If you go on the TrainerRoad forum, there's a thread for ride code sharing, and that's where you can share like, hey, I want to work out at this time in this time zone. Everyone wants to join me, and then we are working on stuff to make it easier. Again, like we just launched really the minimal, delightful product that we could, and then we're going to add stuff. So there are many engineers, product managers, designers in the background working on stuff to make that process easier. But for now, I mean, the best thing is just to like ask your friends who are cyclists. I think most cyclists know at least like it's hard not to know other cyclists, right? If you're a cyclist, you're training for an event, and then schedule some rides and then show up. And you can just share that code. Like it could be a week ahead or a few days ahead. You can get that code and share it with somebody. It doesn't have to be like right before. And you can put that in a like Google Calendar invite, and you can just invite people to it and they can show up.
Yeah, super easy way to do it. I think that's a good one. Next question, and a lot of people have said like, I don't want people to see my suffer face, or I don't, I usually just train in my bibs or anything like that. What say you to that?
Okay, so first, let's say no nudity, right? But if you're wearing stuff that's like
then
you would see
again,
at the beach,
PG-13 folks.
Yeah. If you're with your people and your people are okay with whatever it is, that's fine.
yeah,
No judgment.
We can't see these streams. They're all like they're peer-to-peer and like encrypted, so we can't see anything.
Right.
But yeah, so do that. Another thing is there's some really great base layers. If you usually just use bibs, I got there's like a Rafa one. There's some cheaper ones, or even just like a Nike Dry Fit shirt. Those are pretty cheap. I really like the Rafa one that I have. John, you have some you like too.
Yeah, it's the Rafa Pro Team base layer. I like going for just the short sleeve one or the sleeveless. Both are great options. I like the short sleeve usually just because it gives me one less, because otherwise I have like 4 seams on my shoulders and sometimes they don't line up, and I'm an obsessive person and I don't like it when they don't line up. So I like the short sleeve one, but they're fantastic base layers. They're like a very light mesh, and that's what you really kind of want to look for. I also have like really vented jerseys, some from Quare, and they're basically a base layer more or less. The jersey itself, it's very thin and it's pretty porous. So it's nice to have something that can allow as much airflow over your core as possible. That's an important thing to have. So yeah, something vented. But then, like to your point, Nate, it could also be like a Nike Dry Fit shirt or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be cycling apparel.
I just wear t-shirts.
Totally, t-shirt. And then if you don't even want to use a t-shirt, you just want to use bibs, that's also okay. It's not like anybody's judging anybody in these moments, right? Like we're all working out. We all look, if from the outside in, probably somebody goes, oh, wow, that person's sweaty and it looks like they're working hard. And yeah, we are. And anybody that's in that workout, they are not judging you. I feel like it's a judgment-free zone.
Totally.
This is the bigger thing. Like, really no one in the world cares what you look like.
Yeah.
Unless you look like the tiger people with the... If you
Tiger
have a mullet,
King, man.
Tiger King, yeah.
Then you look awesome, I think is what you're going for. Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, like, too, I think people look good when they're suffering. Like, you look at, like, pro athletes, and when they're in, like, their deepest, like, phase, it's like, wow. Like, you respect that person because they're going so deep and stuff. So the more, like, sweaty and crazy you get, the more I think I respect you and think you're, like, trying hard.
It's impressive.
I don't know. Do you get that, Amber? Did anyone care?
No,
like, did
it was
anyone
actually...
ever be like...
It was funny because like I was riding with Colin the other day and he's like, oh man, I'm getting sweaty. And I was like, I can't even tell on the video stream, first of all. Second of all, we were laughing and making jokes about how this is a judgment-free zone. And then I realized that when I'm on the trainer, as you guys know, I like to eat a lot of carbohydrate. So I was eating some blocks and I was like, wow, I've never had to think about chewing with my mouth open on the trainer before. And I laughed and I just kind of joked about it with Colin. And he was like, no, this is judgment-free zone. And it's actually really nice because everybody's doing the same thing at the same time. So I think part of what's motivating is you're seeing your training buddies dig really deep for the intervals. And that's part of what's motivating you to dig deep. And that's why you're there. You're not there to post some, highly filtered, posed, whatever. Like you're there to get a workout. And I almost think it's better than the gym, right? Because you go to the gym and there's a bunch of strangers in there. You don't know those people. This is even better because the only people that are in the room with you are people that you know. And even if it's somebody that you met on the forum, it's a fellow TrainerRoad user who is just there to get a workout with you and to connect. So I don't know. I think it's awesome. It's this like little safe space where you can just dig deep, sweat like crazy, have a blast, and everybody's on the same page.
Yep. Another thing too, if you don't have anything like what we were talking about for a top, you can always just do a jersey and then unzip the jersey over the course of the ride. If you come in with the jersey zipped up, you might feel like, okay, I feel like I'm, any sort of like complex that you're managing internally, you got it. And then if your jersey unzips throughout the course of the ride, nobody will care because nobody cares, period, in the beginning. So beside ourselves, right? We're always the ones that care.
One more point on this, like the way you look. And so this could really help. If everyone could do this, this would help us a bunch. But we're not taking like automatic selfies in the app because that would be a huge privacy thing. But if you ask your people, hey, do you guys mind if I take a selfie with us? And you take a picture of the screen and then put that up to Instagram @TrainerRoad and then put it on your Strava, that will help get the word out so much for us. And if you look at those pictures, if you look at @TrainerRoad or my new Instagram name is tr.nate or any of ours, and you'll see that you can't you're not seeing the pores in somebody's face, right?
No.
It's more of an outline. And then the other cool thing you could do is backlight yourself and then you look like one of those 60-minute people.
You're
like,
in this witness protection program.
Yeah, exactly. There's just a silhouette and just hear like heavy breathing.
Yeah.
Another tip for in ride. So if you run Spotify on the app or on your desktop app, you can put it at like quarter volume or half volume, and you can, if you're in an aerobic ride, you can kind of hear it in the background. That's really fun. You can still hear people talk. Or the other thing is you put it up to higher volume, and you can either toggle it, or I have a button on my MacBook Pro to do it, to play the sound. Is that when you're in an interval, no one's talking, right? So when you're, besides Ray and John, it's for some reason on lunch. But
you can go on our YouTube channel to see that. Yep, the live stream.
So if you're doing a longer interval, even like a 20-minute interval, people usually aren't talking. You turn the music on, but just being there and seeing the people all doing the work, and you can see their power targets, and you don't want to quit. That's really cool. Ramp test is not supported at the moment, or custom workouts, but Ramp test engineer is working on it right this second. So hopefully by the time you hear this, or a couple days afterwards, we have that out too.
Yep. So exciting stuff. You should all check this out. I'm sure that you probably saw it on cycling news sites all over the place that we're coming out. Yeah, pretty exciting stuff. Lots of folks are loving it, and I love it too. And if you want to ride with us, let us know. You can shoot us messages, head over to our Instagram. And one other thing too, Nate, that you said when you were talking about sharing it on Instagram, use a couple hashtags. Get faster for sure. With any of your TrainerRoad stuff, but then on these ones, you should use faster together too. That's how a lot of people are finding the different people that are riding and everything else like that. So it'd be awesome.
Oh yeah.
So good stuff. Cool. So Nate, another question, person basically asking like, what do I do if other people are doing, or like my friends are doing workouts that aren't on my plan? That's a big question that we're getting as well. How would you answer that one?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to do it. One, if you have an aerobic ride and they have a workout that's main VO2 max, you can join, switch to resistance or slope mode, and just do whatever the aerobic wattage would be for that workout, and just kind of be in the background. We're working on something to be able to desync that, so you could do a different workout with them. If that is the case, just don't talk during the intervals, because you want to kill that person. The next thing is, and Chad, I'll probably start it, Chad, and you can finish this answer.
Yeah, sure.
That if you aim for the same energy systems. So if it's a threshold workout, do a threshold workout. If you have another one on that week, switch them around. So if maybe Tuesday was VO2 max, but Thursday was threshold, and your friends are doing a threshold on Tuesday, switch those around. The thing you have to be careful about is where are you in your progression, because their plans are progressive. So if they, for instance, are doing 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off VO2 max intervals, but you're on 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, and you're not as far through, what you can do is, in that workout, one, you can try it, and if you do it, congrats. You can probably jump ahead in the plan a little bit. And you might be able to with the group workout. But if you're having struggle, you can always tick it down a little bit, or you could backpedal for the first 10 seconds and then get that same 30 seconds on that you would in the other one. Mm-hmm. And it's a key that if you can't do all the intervals that other people are doing, rather than fading at the very end, just delay your start. So if everyone started, say if it's a 3-minute interval and you can't do the last 30 seconds, wait 30 seconds and then start. Another cool thing that we haven't said is that this workout is synced with everyone. There's a host, and once they push play, everyone's kept in sync. And if you come in late, you're kept in sync the whole time. So that's so you can do that where you just kind of skip 30 seconds and go. Chad, do you have anything to add to that?
I do, actually. I have a lot of considerations that I want people to keep in mind with this, because I want this to be utilized. I think it's going to be hugely motivational. And just out of the box, this is something that's maybe a little off topic. It's not on the list here. It's definitely on topic, but in terms of motivation, I don't think it's going to dry up anytime soon. You're exercising in a group now. You're on a schedule. I mean, there's so many aspects that are going to be more motivating than training in an isolated manner. Mm-hmm. If, however, you have your same group of 5, and for whatever reason you find yourself becoming less and less engaged, in the unlikely event that occurs, try leading a class, because it's a whole different situation where you're the one who's responsible for it, especially if you're a coach. Well, obviously if you're a coach, but if you're someone who is considering coaching, or you just want to, kind of take the reins, it's pretty interesting to be the person who's responsible for the workout that everyone else is doing. It puts a different spin on it. So little out there, but something to keep in mind. More than anything, I want people to keep in mind what they can do in terms of their training load. This is a super easy opportunity to train in excess. And that might be a good thing. It might be a bad thing. That cuts both ways. So you have to recognize I have the opportunity to train more. I want to train more because I'm motivated and because this is really fun and interesting. Just make sure you don't overdo it. You don't always have to do, like Nate just said, you don't always have to do the workout everyone else is doing. You can do a lighter intensity version of it. You can put it in erg mode, or slope mode or manual mode and just ride along at your own intensity. But just because you can train more, it's just like it's always been, doesn't mean you should train more. There might be some benefit there, excuse me, but that benefit's probably going to come in adding lower intensity additional mileage, not in doing more interval workout. So be sensible about it. Follow the recommendations we've tried to adhere to all along. And then the workouts, if you're going to jump into somebody else's workouts, as Nate mentioned, it's probably a good idea. It is a good idea to make sure it's the same energy system. If they're doing VO2 max work, make sure that's the workout that you have scheduled. Or if you're going to pluck it from somewhere else in your week, yes, there is some intention behind how those workouts are laid out in a week, but it's not so important that if you bypass it or alter it here and there, that it's going to make some impactful difference. And if it does, well, catch yourself and then just recognize I need to do my VO2 max workouts early in the week and save my muscle endurance for later in the week, or vice versa. Figure out what suits you. And then ideally train with someone who's doing the same training plan, because even if you're not at the same point in the same training plan, it's really likely that you're going to be doing a similar type of workout. What were we going to say,
I was going to say compliance is like king, or consistency and compliance are king above all. Yeah. So if you have problems getting through the week, switching the days around, but getting through the week is better than doing them the exact days, but then not doing some workouts.
Far
right,
better.
Chad?
Yes, yeah. Exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Cool.
And there are a lot of ways. Let me just give an example of if you're doing, like Nate said, if you're doing VO2 max work, maybe you're doing 30-30s and the people you're riding with have scheduled a 3-minute straight interval workout. I mean, you can make that happen within a 3-minute block. You can work for 30, take a break for 30, etc. Or you can just see what it's like to, even though you've only progressed to the point where you're doing 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, what's it like to knock it down from 120 to maybe 118 or 117 and see what an entire 3-minute duration is like. If you can jump right to that and get through it and have a quality workout, that's a huge win. I mean, it's just another arrow in the quiver.
Perfect. Nate, do you have anything else that you'd want to add?
No, that sounds awesome.
I think we covered it. So everybody head over to the forum. So it's trainerroad.com/forum. Or you can just Google the TrainerRoad forum and you can find it there. You can find those different spots where people are sharing ride codes and you can train with people. If you want to ride with us, just let us know. Reach out to us. It'll be fun. You can jump into the forum and tag us, that sort of thing, and then we'll know where to go and where to ride. Nate and I have done, some might say, entirely too many rides over the past 10 days or so. We've done a lot of them.
That's another good thing to say is right now, John and I, at least I am not on any training plan. I'm just trying to ride with users and test new versions of the software as much as possible. So if you look at my Strava, you're like, Nate, what are you doing? Yeah, it makes no sense. So don't try to make sense. And I have no events. And so my goal is, think of this as an unstructured off-season kind of riding rather than I'm following a very structured plan.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Once we get through some of this stuff, then I really want to get it real. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to do a plan, do some extra volume. We'll invite some people. It'll be really fun.
I think as a result of doing the press rides with users, testing everything else, I looked at it the other day. Out of the last 14 days, I think 13 of those days I did VO2 work because so
this is going to be a learning process for all of us, though. I mean, we've had structured training and we've had the possibility of working out with others. We haven't had them both at once, so this is going to be a learning process for all of us.
Yeah. Well, and really in this case, it's just because of the obligation, right? In the sense of, with work and everything else. And it's been awesome to do, but yeah, it's totally possible to follow this and stick within your plan. Absolutely. And like Nate said, I think the best thing to do right now is if you still want to ride with friends, yesterday. So I did my scheduled workout with my training plan, knocked that out. And then I joined that Pettit ride in the morning beforehand. But if it was a more intense ride, I still would have joined that ride to ride with my friends, but I would have just kept the intensity really low. I would have just rode at whatever intensity I wanted for that ride, right? Nice and low. So there are plenty of ways to do it. But in other words, don't look at what Nate and I are doing and just ask, and follow what we're doing. It's not guided and structured right now. We're trying to ride with a lot of different folks. So, and also VO2 workouts are very interesting and very illustrative for press purposes and everything else. So that's why we've been doing a lot of VO2. Okay, so with all of that said, let's just get straight into Kyle's question. He says, I have 2 questions. Number 1, I currently have a road and TT bike. And he actually has more than 2 questions. He has like questions nested within the 2 questions. So we'll address them one by one. I currently have a road and TT bike and 1 power meter. And he mentions that those are Garmin power pedals, which I think the vectors is what he's getting at. He says, ideally, I'd like to do Wednesday rides on my TT bike and the remainder of my rides on my indoors on my road bike. My hope would be to maintain a certain amount of position adaptation on the TT position with the ability to do a focused training bout 1 or 2 weeks out from the TT event. Is this ill-advised? So first things first, addressing this one, and Amber, maybe pushing this one to you since you were, actually a pro cyclist where you had to do well in TTs and then had to do well on your road bike as well. What's the best way to balance that, or how did you balance that?
Well, especially in the early part of the season, it doesn't take a lot of time on the TT bike every week to maintain an adaptation to that position. So this is with the caveat that if you already have your position really dialed and you know this is a position that works for you in a race situation where you're trying to put down lots of watts, great. At that point, when you're in the off season or you're in your base and your build scenarios, honestly, just like 1 day a week on the TT bike can be enough to maintain those physiologic adaptations, making sure that your tendons and your joints are used to the particular angles that they're operating within on the TT bike in that aero position. That's enough. And then as you're getting closer to a TT specific event, that's when you want to start spending more and more time on it, doing intervals on it, doing real efforts on it. But if you don't have that position really, really dialed for a race scenario, keep in mind that the feeling of being in that aero position on a recovery ride is going to be very, very different from how it's going to feel when you're really trying to go at max effort. So it's really important to get that position dialed as quickly as you can so that you can then just start spending time within that position to adapt your body to, just being in that aero, that slightly uncomfortable aero position.
That's the hard part, right? Because it's always like balancing the whole question of how much do I spend on the TT bike. Chad, what workouts, like this looks like Wednesdays, a lot of the time that tends to be an easy day for a lot of people in their plan. Was that what you would do?
I think that's a good opportunity to get some low intensity in position. But as Amber just mentioned, that it's functional in certain ways, but it's not going to tell you whether or not your position is dialed. I mean, you can get away with a lot when you're working at 50% or 60% of threshold that you're not going to be able to get away with when you're trying to hold something closer to threshold. So, but they are good opportunities to just spend time in position and just to see, because it's also, they offer something that the more intense rides don't offer, is that your weight isn't necessarily on your feet and your muscles. It's more it's going to be on your crotch largely and your elbows. So that can tell you, do I feel balanced right now? Do I feel balanced when I don't have a bunch of tension on my legs? So there are things you can glean from low intensity aero rides that you couldn't from higher intensity ones.
I was just going to say for like a show, like a raise of hands between us 4 here, I find riding easy on the TT bike, I mean, obviously until a certain point,
so
harder than riding like at race pace, right?
Agreed.
Ditto. Yeah.
No.
Not Nate? Oh, man.
No. Riding easy is easy.
No, like in terms of the discomfort brought on by the position. And now granted, if I'm, if getting toward the end of some sort of 20-minute TT, 30-minute TT, 40, 50, whatever it is, that also gets extremely uncomfortable. But it's like a different kind of discomfort almost. I don't know if anybody else relates to that.
It's like being on the TT bike when you're riding easy is where you identify all your hot spots. Like,
yes.
It's just that's what comes straight to the surface immediately. You're like, oh, okay, those are are the contact points.
And do recognize that this is maintenance like anything else. If you have a wide base and you simply have to touch it up, that's one thing. Experienced time trialists, I mean, even the best in the world, they may get on the TT bike once a week, and then they just address fitness in their most comfortable, most productive in terms of power positions. But if you're new to this and time trialing is important to you, if you're a triathlete, you have to spend a lot of time in position. So it will depend on obviously your discipline, the focus, how good you want to be as a time trialist, and what sort of background you have in this position. You've been doing it a lot. The touch-up's simple. If you're new to it, you got to do a lot of it.
Right. I will say that the caveat to my experience was I was never like a time trial specialist specifically. So that wasn't, the thing that I was training for all season long. I was mostly doing stage races, most often in a support role. So yes, I wanted to do well in the time trials, but I also needed to make sure that I was going to be equally prepared to do well in a hilly road race the following day or in a criterium. So I was really training myself to be an all-rounder. And as such, I didn't need to spend that much time on the TT bike. I will say that my former teammate, Christine Thorburn, who's an Olympian, and she was an absolute time trial monster, Olympic, I think she was 4th in the Olympics. I mean, she's the real deal. Yeah. She would only ride her TT bike fast. And that was part of her training, was she only wanted to have an association of high speed, high effort anytime she was in that position and on that bike. So she was creating this like Pavlovian response to being on her TT bike. Like, you on your TT bike, you're going fast.
Yeah, that's
a totally different approach.
Yeah, it's like with runners saving their racing flats for only race days. They don't train in them. They save them for the days where they need to feel fast and obviously be fast.
Right.
Another thing is, to Chad's point, is I think and Amber's too. So whatever your goal is, right? But also then how the difference between the power on your road bike and your TT bike. So if there's a huge gap, you might need to spend more time to get that to close. Yes. And some people will never get it closed all the way. But if it's pretty close and you could maintain it with once a week, and you're doing stage races like Amber where there's like other pivotal parts, then that's probably it. But if you're a triathlete, maybe you're doing most of your rides on the TT bike.
Yeah, and on the topic of stage racers, I mean, stage racers face more challenges than really any type of bike racer because they have to be so incredibly versatile. So you have to consider also, I need to be good at all these things. I need to be a good time trialist, probably need to be a good climber, probably need to have a bit of a sprint, need to be able to hang in for the long haul, need to be able to ride in the field. All the challenges that stage racers face. They also have to determine, where their strengths are and if they're going to play to those strengths. So if you are going to approach stage racing from the perspective of I want to dominate the time trial and protect a lead, then you're probably going to need to spend more time on your TT bike in your TT position at TT power than someone who's simply going to get through the time trial and worry about the climb.
Mm-hmm.
That's
exactly.
An interesting point that you made, Amber, and we probably shouldn't get into it now because we could go down this rabbit hole for a long time. But it's interesting nonetheless. I know, right? But being a domestique, but because that was your focus as a pro racer, primarily speaking, right? Mm-hmm. Not all the time, but primarily. But then at the same time, also being an athlete that was probably had a really good shot at doing well in time trials, just because of the fact that you have higher power than a lot of the smaller women.
Yeah.
And it's because of that, I'm sure that it was probably tempting a lot of the time to be like which one do I pick, right? Like, I could probably do really well in this TT, but I know that the team orders are to do this, and I really like doing this. That had to have been tough, like, to try to decide between the two.
Yeah, usually, in most cases, we had the green light to go for it in the time trial, but there would not infrequently be cases where the director would just tell you, you need to soft pedal this one. And then at that point, your job is do the math on time cut and make the time cut. Basically, you try to go as slow as possible and still make the time cut. So yeah, it was interesting. It really depended, but for the most part, I would say we usually had free reign to go for it in the TTs just to see what you could do. That said, usually in those circumstances, you've just blown yourself the 2 days before working for somebody else. So you're not really in a position to actually give 100% effort. But nonetheless, you learn from every single experience. So it was all good.
It sounds like you were doing your job.
Yes. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Sometimes we see maybe male pro cyclists maybe not do their job, but it's like ego overtakes what they should be doing for their team.
Yeah. Watch the movie star
podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, watch the movie star documentary, right, Chad?
Yeah. We should ask that on Beers with Chad.
It.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah, Beers with Chad.
I still have a few more episodes to watch, but yeah, it's probably not the safest topic.
By the way, there's something cool you can do. I've heard some people do this with group workouts, is Netflix watch parties. So this is something new. It's a Chrome plugin, and it will sync a Netflix movie. And if you have the audio going through your headphones, that's another thing we should say, audio goes to your headphones and get your mic set to your laptop.
Yes.
You do that. You do a long workout with just one other person. You can watch a show together. And it's like this cool experience to watch the movie together, or Tiger Kings or whatever it's called. And And do it, and the time goes by super fast when you're watching with somebody and you're doing an aerobic ride. So you don't need to like just stare at somebody for 2 hours and talk to them. You can do something else with it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. And one quick thing on that too, the reason that you want to put your microphone to your computer is, in most cases at least, that's because the fan is hitting you, not your computer. So it makes it a lot quieter. And we are working on like some sound filtering and everything else. And we'll continue to improve and work on that since that's what we're committed to, constant improvement, right? So we'll continue to improve in this regard and try to get it to the point where maybe we even figure out the sound so that doesn't need to happen. But for now, I definitely think it's a good thing to set your microphone to your computer so it's out of the wind. It really helps for everybody else.
Since we're kind of on the topic of fans, can I bring up just a topic I've wanted to mention and never seems to weave its way into the conversation?
No. Next question.
Gonna do it anyway. In terms of TT position, if you're somebody who has trouble spending time in position, or you just find yourself complacently drifting out of position, you don't even recognize it, this is a tip I used to use and I'm using these days to remind myself to stay down, to stay low. I set my fans so that I don't, so that I only really get their cooling benefit if I'm in position. So if I'm sitting up tall, the fan misses me. But once I get down into my arrow position, the fan's right on my torso.
Ooh. That's a good idea. And I will say, actually, on the group workouts, I can see myself in the lower corner. It was interesting to have that visual feedback because I was like, ooh, I need to be engaging my core a little bit more and stabilize so I'm not all over the bike, which actually that could be a great thing if you're practicing being in the arrow position. You can actually see essentially what your CDA is, right? You can see what silhouette, CDA being your coefficient of drag, but you can make yourself smaller and see how you're changing your shape on the bike.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm a huge rocker. I didn't realize that until I see the video, and I'm like, wow, you're rocking the entire ride.
I've seen a lot of that. I haven't done a whole lot of group rides, but I've watched a fair amount of what we put out there, and there are a lot of inefficiencies that some low-hanging fruit for some folks.
Look at Chad.
Yeah.
I want to see, do we know from Specialized, I want to know rocking versus staying still, what that does to your CDA. Because you would think
makes
that,
a
like,
big
the
difference
rocking,
with time trialing.
Yeah. So I want to know exactly, like, in the row position and TTing, what the watt difference is. So if they could do a test on that where they have some person rock and then just, like, stay perfectly still, I'd like to see.
Yep.
Because that'd be something, that could be if you could get 5 watts out of that, that's significant.
That's one of the reasons I think Chad is so aero. So for his size, right?
Just
he's
watch the best
move.
TTers. I mean, very few of them have that wasted motion side to side. And that doesn't mean that it's more effective. It would be interesting to see that, but I'm going to place my money on that side of things.
Yeah.
I wonder if you rock side to side in like a perfect harmonic motion, if you could get like the trailing eddies to line up just so that they actually create a propulsion force.
If only we were this precise, right?
And if the wind stayed at consistent angles, I mean, I don't,
Yeah. All those things.
Cool.
I want to see it.
His next question says, jumping back in, he says, also with a torque wrench, is transferring the power pedals between bikes weekly a problem if kept within the spec of 25 to 30 foot-pounds? So we're going to cover this really quick, but he says, I would hate to be doomed to do a ramp test every Thursday. So the reason that he's saying this is because yes, first of all, most pedals should not be torqued to 25 to 30 pounds. The way that I install pedals, which you should have a professional install your pedals. I'm thinking lawyer stuff here. So only professional bike shop people should install your pedals, and do not take this advice as any sort of legal recommendation. But when I put my pedals on, I hand tighten them. And then after that, I grab my Allen key and I don't go crazy. I just snug it, right? Like I don't need to lock it on there really hard. And I'm sure plenty of you have experienced this before. When you can't get a pedal off because you tightened it too much, or you didn't use like Never Sees, that stuff that basically stops the metal from bending and binding and basically locking on itself. If you do that, oh my gosh, it's terrifying, because first of all, it's really hard to do. You end up like torquing your frame, and there's always a chain ring nearby just to gouge your hand, which is terrifying. So you don't need to tighten them down too much. 25 to 30 pounds is way more than most need. However, these specific power pedals, I think the first gens that came out from this, they did need to be torqued down. To this level, right? And 25 to 30 is a crazy range, and I wonder if that's why everybody gets different readings in terms of because that's what he's talking about there. If he torques it down differently, he can get different power readings. That was one of the inefficiencies of these power pedals. So that's why he's asking to do a ramp test every week, everything else like that. So the torque setting, instead of giving yourself a window of 25 to 30, if you are using pedals like that, you should do the same exact torque spec every single time, right? Like every time.
So this is the Garmin Vector 1, and that's what these require. But then after, the 2 and 3s don't require this same torque setting thing. And those are the ones that you get now. So that should just be said. And the Vector 1 should be precise and accurate if you do this spec. So what Jonathan's saying is just do 27 feet-pounds, get your torque wrench, and do that every time you change it. And there should be no reason that you should have to redo a RAM test every Thursday.
For sure.
That's what your power meter's for.
Yes, exactly. Next question, should I go non-power-based outdoor rides on my TT bike until I am going to do a TT-focused block? So once again, he's in this situation where he has to transfer pedals, torque them down to a specific spec. It's a bit of a hassle, right? What would y'all say to that? Basically, like, should he just do that? What do you say, Nate?
Kyle,
I say, go ahead. Go ahead, Chad. Go ahead, Nate.
Let me just say, Kyle, my only hesitation is because of that torque setting and the idea of the bloody knuckles that could ensue. Definitely put your chain on your on your big chain ring if you're gonna do this.
There.
And from the coach's perspective, from the data analytic racers and riders perspective, always collect data. Always collect data. Even if you're not going to utilize the data in the moment, it can prove useful afterward. And in this case, as much as I love the idea, and I do want to encourage you to learn what it feels like to time trial at this power indoors and then go outdoors and see if you can emulate that without the data feedback. I think that's a great idea, but I still want you to collect that data.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use the power. I mean, obviously. Give power. If you can do it, just do it. And then to Chad's point too, you can always switch your screen on your Garmin or Wahoo. See what it feels like. Be like, okay, I'm going to try to hold this for 10 minutes at race pace without looking at it, and then look at the data later. But yeah, record it all the time.
Yeah, I think that the also taking a step back and looking at it, this is switching the pedals twice a week, right? Taking them off one bike and then putting them back on that bike eventually. So it's not too big of a deal to get that. And the one thing that's I always find motivating when I'm riding on the TT bike and doing anything that's a bit more focused on that is when I see that my 7 out of 10 RPE actually now is a higher wattage than what it was before, right? And it may not be something where you feel like you're going all out. It's just you realize that your cruise pace has gone up because you've adapted to it. So it's definitely, or because you've just gotten faster in general. And as a result, your cruise pace has gone up, even though you haven't been working on that position directly.
Two, it might not seem like it, but I am inherently lazy. And like, I understand you're like, oh, I don't want to change the pedals. It's going to take so long. But then if you think about it, like for real, you're like, wow, that would be 7 minutes a week. Like, yeah. I guarantee I watch 7 TikToks that go by instantly a week of people doing dances. And yeah, it's not that bad, right?
Right.
It's like rolling too. Like, I don't have time to roll. I'm like, it's what, 10 minutes? You probably get something out of it.
You're foam rolling, lazy. You're saying?
Yeah, exactly. I need to not be so lazy about stuff like that. You could even watch TikTok while you roll.
Yes, exactly. We can all do that, right? There's so many things about like the maintenance of our entire program that individually that we have, right? A lot of different things, like making sure that you're eating more, making sure that you're drinking more. It's like all these little things that probably don't take a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. It's just out of our normal routine. But if you can look outside of your normal routine and think about what you should be doing, like Nate, something you've mentioned before is like, whatever activity you're doing, is this making me the person I want to become, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at it in that regard, and if you look at your basically, look back and look at your power or riding on your TT bike. If you want to become a faster time trialist, then that's the sort of thing where you start allocating more to that because that's the sort of person you want to become. That's when you're going to measure data on that because it's something that's important. So it's all about priorities, really.
I want some feedback from everybody. So Chad has no idea what TikTok is, but what I want to do, there are some dances. I'm just messing with you, Chad. Yeah, okay. There are some dances on TikTok, and once this thing ends, I so want to get the 4 of us together and do some of these dances and post them. Come on, everybody. Like, please tell us that you would like to see us do these. It would be amazing. We could do it with a Beers with Chad episode. We could do it live.
It's going to take a lot of beer.
This is a really scientific, unbiased survey right here that's happening.
We'll get 4 Chimay Blues and Chad, and he'll just be good God dancing his heart out.
Never.
You're a savage, Chad.
In capital letters.
Okay.
All right.
We just got all caps Chad.
I'm sure Brandon or Pete, they'll happily step in for me.
Oh no, you'll do it.
I'll watch. I can't even promise that. That's it's so awkward for me just thinking about it.
The third question, he says, with the large amount of indoor riding many are looking at right now, are there any maintenance tips or tricks that I should be mindful of, or the great TR Brain Trust would recommend? So this is, once again, we're still definitely in the midst of this battle against COVID-19 and managing that whole thing on a global scale. So a lot of us listening to this are, not only that, I think I saw the other night that nearly 90% of our country here in the United States is on the stay-at-home order. So, and that I'm sure will just increase as time goes on. So a lot of us are riding inside. Nate, I remember in the middle of a live workout or group workout with you and I, we're training, and I unplugged one of my headphones and I heard my drivetrain. I was like, oh my gosh, like it sounded like it was a metal scrap factory behind me. That's super common, right? I think all of us have had that, or you're training inside, your bike's just on the trainer, you use headphones every time, so you probably don't hear it quite as much. Then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, my drivetrain needs to be lubed, cleaned, and taken care of like you normally would.
Or you just think because you're outside and you're not accumulating road grime that you don't need to lube your drivetrain, but you do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure, right? Yeah, it's not just the grime that hits there. It's that lube dissipates and that lube actually falls off. So don't train on a white carpet if you've put lube on right then. Bad, I've done that before when I first started. So
who has white carpet?
When we first started, when I first started cycling and I got a trainer off of Craigslist, and I put it in our apartment, we had white carpet, and oh yeah, yep, I left a black streak. It was bad. So anyways, but the point is your drivetrain will dry out and it just needs to be maintained and checked. It has to. And also if you really have this bike, a lot of people just have a trainer bike and that sits on there for a long time. That goes into drivetrain maintenance, that goes into chain stretch, gears, all that stuff. You have to keep track.
I have a pro tip. So I just re-waxed my chain, and I've done a lot of waxing, and the hardest part of waxing is stripping your chain. But what I did this last time is I bought a ceramic speed chain. So they come with, it's a little bit more expensive, but they do the stripping for you. And then I can now re-wax this chain with, I use molten speed wax rather than, I don't even know if they sell a ceramic speed wax, but you get a chain that has all the bad stuff or all the grease off. And if you wax your chain, actually the chain lasts a lot longer. So although it's a little more expensive, first you get their optimized chain at the very beginning, which is nice for a race. But then afterwards, it can be a nice training and racing chain if you re-wax it. And you don't even have to really there'll be gunk on it. But we here at TrainerRoad, we have a crock pot that's like for training chains. And what you do is you get the benefits of all the low noise and stuff, and maybe there's a little grime in there, but I swear it's still, based on how my drivetrain rolls and my cranks move, it's more efficient than lubing your chain. And it's really just takes, the amount of work is like 10 minutes to be able to re-wax it, and then it lasts for weeks and weeks and weeks, depending how much you ride, especially if you're indoors and you don't cross chain, you keep it like in a straight line, it can last for a really long time, and you can have a really quiet drivetrain.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good one. A couple other things too. You want to make sure that you've once again, if your bike is on the trainer for a long time, grease your headset, right? Like that's the sort of thing, or just make sure that it's maintained. Most bikes these days, unless you're really sweating a ton onto that thing, chances are you're not going to have to worry about greasing your headset because they've gotten much better at being able to just stay in a good state with that. But it's absolutely worth something to consider. Nate, what were you going to say?
I never knew that was a thing until you said it, and I've never done that ever.
Yeah.
So
really?
Honestly, so headset.
How am I supposed to know? We've never talked about it in 250 episodes.
It's true. Yeah. It's something that a lot of creeks come from bikes and from a lot of different spots, and chasing down a creek is always tough. And when you talk about, a lot of the time, once again, Chad, to your point, we think that we're just because we're riding not outside, but riding inside, that all those things we don't need to maintain. It's just like the same thing. We think we don't need to drink as much. We don't need to eat as much. We don't need to cool as much. We don't need to do any of those things. For some reason, we associate that when we're not training outside. But if anything, the higher quality work that you're doing, the more work you're doing, the more you need to worry about all that stuff. And the same thing goes with this. So even though you aren't riding outside, your headset probably still needs to be greased. Everything else on the bike serviced like normal. It just needs to happen. And one thing for sure, make sure everything is torqued down properly. This is just bikes in general. Nate?
Wait, you should have mentioned that
Yeah.
about 100 episodes ago.
Yeah, check your bolts, Nate, for sure. Also, have any of you ever gotten to the point where you go to stand up and get out of the saddle on the indoor trainer and you're like, oh wow, my tire's flat, or really close to flat, and suddenly it's like a balloon up front? I'm sure we've all done that.
Honestly, I've gotten to the point where I leave it flat now. It's completely flat because tubeless tires, I just can't stay on top of it.
Yeah, they do leak over
I
time.
know. It's like 3 minutes a week you got to spend to like keep a tubeless tire up. It's crazy.
So this is not
really
advisable.
stressful.
Yeah,
Sorry,
totally
Chad.
stressful.
This is a Harp on Chad episode. Sorry,
Yeah.
Chad.
Apparently.
This is not advisable to
all
do
love.
what Chad did there, because if you do ride on your tire creased all the time, it can, depending on the environment you're in, it can crack them. And
I'm not advocating it. I'm just pinning it on my laziness and the fact that I've been beaten. I give up.
Oh, we've all done that though, right?
Oh,
like
yeah,
all of us
totally.
have done that, or like, it's flat, whatever, I don't care, and then we run it, but it's
I
probably
just want
not
to get
the
my
best
workout
idea.
done. Just get it done.
Yeah, exactly. And then one other thing too to think about is on your trainer. Trainers need maintenance too. Like if you just ride them forever, like I'm thinking of the Wahoo Kicker in particular. A lot of people I see, they have like problems with it, either like it becomes out of balance or stuff like that. And there's this big flywheel on there and it has a cap. And under that cap, it has a nut, and that nut can come loose and things can start to wobble. So you just have to check the bolts on your trainer just like you check them on your bike. And the final thing I would say is, if you have a smart trainer, find out where you have a light sensor. Usually that's how they sense speed, is they have like some sort of little sensor where there's a light. And if there's dust getting on that thing, that can also affect readings for sure. So
if you have the light issue, and that's specific to as far as I know, the Kicker, it'll go crazy instantly. It won't be like you're like, oh, this is hard, it's 5 watts off. It'll be like, it'll either not work or the numbers will be really crazy. For the maintenance stuff, just Google like your trainer and like maintenance, or contact the manufacturer, because they're all a little bit different. So if you're worried about it, just do that rather than just like tightening everything down, because I don't know if one of them has a torque spec on a certain trainer and like you tighten your rollers down too much and then they don't spin, or I don't know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and then dust everything off too, right? Sweat. Let's talk when we're going to talk about sweating a little bit later on, but also sweat with your bike and stopping corrosion. That's another big thing. If you are a heavy sweater, number one, make sure you have a good fan first and foremost, or fans, like multiple fans. Do whatever you can to cool yourself off as much as you can. But then on top of that too, I've seen a lot of people cover up their bolts with like tape, so then they don't sweat on them, is the thought process. But that actually in most cases doesn't work, because your tape ends somewhere. Sweat is probably going to seep through some sort of crack. And then at that point, you've sealed off a bit of the spot where air can actually circulate. Something interesting I've seen done by, and I won't drop any names because I don't want any sort of responsibility falling on this, but this was a pro mechanic for one of the largest bike manufacturers in the world working on a pro triathlete's bike. And what they did is they basically took the bolts, dunked them in marine grease, and took the different spots where they were having, because a lot of the big problem is your stem bolts or your headset or something like that. And that's where you get a bunch of sweat collecting and a lot of corrosion. And carbon can corrode as well, by the way. It's not just metal. So in those spots where he basically had surfaces meeting surfaces, he just coated the things with marine grease, which is a pretty common thing that you can find. And then he made sure that they were tightened. Now, that can be bad, because some bolts you want like friction paste on them instead of that, right? So this wasn't a bike being ridden outside. This is just a bike being ridden on the trainer. But in that regard, since everything was coated with that layer of marine grease, it stopped everything from getting corroded. So it's something to consider for sure. Instead of just taping things up, think a bit more critically about what you want to protect and how you want to protect it.
That sounds like a good way though to have Nate issues outside.
100%. Once again, inside only, right?
Maybe this is a trainer only bike. But then who cares about the bolts? So on my headset...
Well, they could snap, so that would be bad, even if you're inside.
On my Venge, my headset bolt is like corroded. Like it's been open so much you can tell it's stripping. And I just need to order a new one. They make it sure hard, though, to find like that bolt, right?
Specialized Venge parts, I don't get it. Like I can never find a spare bolt for that, or spare part for that bike. I wish they would give us like a thing online, all bikes, and be like, oh, you want this bolt? And you could just order specific ones, because I would get extras. The other one I can't find, if anyone could say this, it's the like specialized, and this is just a branding aesthetic thing, but the bottle cage bolts, those titanium ones, those strip so easy, but I love the look of them. And I can't find how to get more of them. So I have the big, like, sturdy
like tall ones in there right now. But I would love to be able to get some extra ones of those. And I've asked the bike shop, and they don't get it for me either. So I've just been stealing them off of Chad's bike. So
Great.
So
Chad's gonna check his bikes now, and be like, wait a second.
That's why I don't leave my bikes at the office.
I'm not a particularly heavy sweater. I think that when we worked with Precision Hydration and Andy Blow and the crew there, I was like very normal. But I've never ever had a problem with sweat corrosion on my bikes, for what it's worth.
Same.
That might be just because I've had a fan. So you're in the same boat, right, Chad?
Yeah.
And you sweat. I would say
lot.
it seems like you sweat higher than average.
A lot. Yeah.
And the one thing too, though, is we're in Nevada, which has a very low relative humidity.
That's
so
true.
if we were in Florida and it was like 80, 90%, it could be a different issue.
Totally. And one thing you can do for this for sure that I think is better than grease, better than tape, better than anything like that is have a pretty large size towel that's over your handlebars around your handlebars that covers your stem. And if that's the case, it's going to get absorbed into that towel instead of just dripping and collecting into your bike.
And they make little sweat catchers too, little triangular Velcro adhering sweat catchers. Problem is you might have to reposition your fan.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Nate, you were going to say something?
That's what I was going to say.
We'll check that out.
Chad's on.
We're gonna lump Luke and Ivor's questions into two, kind of, because they represent a lot of questions that are coming in right now. So Luke says, many of us are finding more time to devote to training, like we've just talked about, whether required indoor training or otherwise, with being on a 5 to 7 hour per week training plan right now. And he mentions that he's just entering the build phase for the mountain bike marathon season. How can I add to that to maximize my opportunity without sacrificing necessary rest? So first of all, this is the basic premise that we're going to cover. His specific scenario of basically following a high volume plan that he's going through and then adding to it, we'll talk about, but we'll also talk about, if you're on lower as well. But getting into Ivor's question, which just has a bit more detail and context, so hopefully it can help some more folks. So first he says, thanks again for answering my overtraining question a while back. Happy to do so. And says, I'm doing much better and I'm pretty close to where I was before overtraining. Woohoo. Way to go. Awesome. Nice. That's a hard thing to overcome. Well done. So my question, I've been on a low volume plan from Plan Builder and getting about 800 to 1,000 TSS per week. So obviously adding to that low volume plan, right, with other riding that he's getting in. Says, I understand that not all TSS is created equal. And he says, because I commute 80 miles per day by bike and race on the weekends. I'm in an area that's under a shelter-in-place order and working from home, so I don't have those commutes anymore. And since my kids are home, it's not as simple as just spending the same amount of time on the bike. As such, I jumped to a high-volume plan, which is great, but I can't help but wondering if I should be doing more than just the high-volume plan. Man, can you imagine being the sort of person that's like, I feel like I should be doing more than the high volume, right? It's pretty hard to do. For a lot of people, doing a high-volume plan is really hard to do, period. So just putting that in context for everybody. So it says, if so, and assume I just want to ride indoors, what else should I be doing? I generally do my workouts in the morning. So should I add some lazy mountains, Dans, and Takus in the evening? Those are workouts those are actual like Z2 easy rides, right? That we're talking about
Z1
there.
in some cases.
Yep. And says, and maybe Pettit, which Pettit is going to be tipping up a little higher in intensity with that one. So also, Ivor mentions, on my commutes, I've been doing my best to average just under 50% FTP and keep my highest 2-minute power below 50% FTP because of my bout with overtraining. So being really disciplined with that. 5 stars everywhere and looking forward to seeing you all at the races when this thing is over. So I guess let's go into adding volume, period, for people. Because a lot of people, whether it's they don't have commute time right now, because a lot of people, they don't have to commute anymore. Or if it's just because they have more time, hopefully it's not because of layoffs, stuff like that. But we have a lot of time. Chad, how should we go about adding to what we already do right now?
So first and foremost, probably don't add intensity, because even if you're on a low volume plan, you're getting 2, maybe even 3 days of intensity already. That third day, that weekend ride may not look like an intense ride, but there's intensity there. So if you're going to add intensity, that's going to come in the form of more intervals during the already intense workout. But that's kind of another point we can address later. kind of what you did. I mean, obviously you're not going to add 80 miles per day. That's a ridiculous amount of riding. That's like 400 extra miles a week. It's crazy. That's a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
I still can't wrap my brain around
Tell
that.
us how you really feel, Chad.
It's a serious commute, man.
It's a lot of riding. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like long in the car.
Yeah. Honestly, that's pretty great. I mean, the fact that you could do a low volume plan and couple it with that's terrific. But obviously you can't do that now. So you can get some of that additional mileage in various ways. Yeah, you can add it on, but obviously not to the tune of 80 miles per day per set of workouts or workout. The easy options are to make your warm up a little longer if you have the time, and I'm assuming you do, and then to extend your cool down. Sorry.
Cool downs. Yep.
Yeah. So basically bookends of the workout, a little extra on the beginning, a little extra at the end, or, keep the warm up the same and just add additional on the end. The +5 and the +6 versions, it's not consistent across workouts, but those are typically the workouts where I've done exactly that. The structure of the interval workout doesn't change at all. We just tack on an extra 20, 30, 40 minutes of aerobic endurance. That's a great way to do it. You don't have to do those though. You can still do your regular workout and then just tack on something like you're talking about with maybe not those, even those, the Lazy Mountain and Dans and Tackers, but maybe something like Pettit, or in any case, just do some extra mileage in tandem with your workout. You can also break it into 2 parts, which is super popular amongst high-level riders and really anybody who has the time to accommodate it. There are so many benefits to 2-a-day workouts, whether they're fasted or not, intended or not. And I say intended or not because you wake up in the morning and hop on the bike. It's probably going to be a fasted workout. Might not be intended to be fasted, but it's going to be. If you do it later in the day, you might actually structure it as a fasted workout. Maybe you did your high intensity work early, knowing that later in the day, I'm going to do a lower intensity workout as a fasted workout. Maybe you postpone your carbohydrate intake after that high intensity workout. I mean, these are kind of technical grounds. You have to understand what you're doing and what you're chasing when you starve yourself of carbohydrate relative to intensity rides. I mean, typically it's best to fuel those harder rides. And if you're going to fast any rides, do it with your lower intensity work. It does offer some flexibility that I want to talk about in a second about flip-flopping those. But when you do the high intensity first with the low intensity to follow, we're after a couple of things. One of them is that there's going to be some level of muscle glycogen depletion on that second ride. And this in and of itself fosters its own adaptations, not the least of which is that it increases your capacity for glycogen storage. I mean, what happens when you run your glycogen storage down and then you force another workout on your body with already low glycogen stores is the response is to increase glycogen capacity so the next time you have sufficient sugar stores. And then additionally, because you're operating in a state of less glycogen availability, you're going to increase your percentage of fat metabolism. So the sugar's not there, at least not in the same quantities it normally is. So the body's signal now, or the training signal now, is we're going to have to metabolize different sources of fuel. So this can improve your fat metabolism capability. So it's kind of it addresses both sides of it wonderfully. And then the second thing that happens is there's going to be some level of fiber fatigue. And, you can just as easily interpret that as fiber damage. And what this can do is lead to alternate recruitment patterns, which means more muscle fibers, ones that were dormant, maybe ones that don't get utilized because you don't run them to the same level or the necessary level of fatigue. But in any case, more muscle fibers come on board to contribute to the workload. And I remember reading a Matt Fitzgerald book way back, his Brain Training for Runners, where he used the analogy of a flash flood, in that you're driving to work and the flash flood closes down your usual route. So you take an alternate route and you discover one that's actually faster. So what does that mean? You saved a little bit of gas. You actually found a more efficient route. The same idea here. There's a possibility that you will discover more efficient recruitment patterns by utilizing fibers that don't normally or wouldn't otherwise get utilized.
Yeah, so the two-a-day approach is something that's, I know a lot of us are doing that now. Like, since I don't have my commute on most mornings, I now have the time to be able to do something like that, which is a handy way to do it. And to be able to plug that in for a lot of people listening to this that don't have a commute anymore. And once again, it's not me doing like crazy intensity, like you're saying. Right?
No, and you don't have to. It's a great way to add volume. And whether you intend it to be fasted or not, there's going to be some level of depletion, some level of fiber fatigue.
On the other side of things, also, like, I feel like a lot of us see, like, we're so cyclists. It's hilarious. Like, we're like, I have more time now. how much of instantly we think that has to be cycling time, right? Like, but there's tons of other things that we can do that can even make us a faster cyclist, right, Amber? That like don't include just adding on more time spinning pedals necessarily.
Yeah, I think most of the time people are trying to fit training into a really tight schedule. And so you're time limited. And when you're time limited, you really want to focus on, strength and conditioning essentially. So you want to be doing that really specific training on the bike. If you're a triathlete, you're doing runs, you're doing swims. But when you get that extra time, you can do some of the peripheral types of training that are going to make you faster, that will make you a more well-rounded athlete, help your performance. And those are things like meditation can be huge. I mean, it can be a really integral component of increasing the quality of your recovery, which could be something that with more time, that could actually help you in terms of getting some of those adaptations that you're chasing when you're actually on the bike. Mobility work, another great one to spend a little bit of time on, because oftentimes we don't have time for that. So if you have some extra time, that can be a great way to spend it. And then just doing some maintenance and strength work. I'm a really big fan of going back to the fundamentals. Even as a professional in the off seasons, I would do just really basic skill work. So I would ride rollers, practice riding no-handed, practice riding right up on the edge of the rollers. I'd go out and do bumping drills with my husband in the park by our apartment. I mean, going out and practicing bunny hops. I mean, really, really basic stuff that even as a professional, like, yes, I know how to do that. Yes, I can ride no-handed to get bottles from the car, but it doesn't hurt to practice and strengthen those kind of neuromuscular connections. Just everybody can use practice. Practice makes everybody better, even if it's something that you already know how to do. So I would encourage you to also think outside the box in terms of training, like expand your definition of what it means to be training. It doesn't have to be just pedaling. There's a lot of other things you can do that will contribute to making you a faster athlete. Before I jump off real quick, I want to comment on the fasted thing. Just as a side note, riding fasted and doing fasted training has really different effects for women than it does for men. And that has to do with a lot of the hormonal feedback. So I just want to throw that caveat in there that fasted training tends to work better for men. At least that's what the research suggests right now. And unfortunately, there is limited research on gender differences in fasting. But I just want to throw that out there for consideration. If you're a woman and you're considering fasting, really tune into how it's affecting you, because it might not have the same effects for you as it would for a man.
Yeah, the same goes with intermittent fasting. So if you're looking at it just from a dietary perspective, intermittent fasting has proven to be a greater challenge, far less productive for females than males.
Yeah. Something interesting that you brought up there, Amber, when talking about meditation and mobility work, for sure falls within line on this too. Some of it is painful and not relaxing. Some of it is though. Like you mentioned, Nate, like foam rolling, right? And we can probably fit that in with the time that we have. But one good point to this is a lot of these things can be like parasympathetic activities.
Yes.
And if you look at right now, training, sympathetic. And then our lives, for most of us right now, are more chaotic than normal. We have more worry. We have more concern. We're probably, sitting pretty high up in terms of chemically speaking. We're probably out of balance, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the more you can bring in those parasympathetic activities, I think that you'll probably find yourself getting more balanced and into a spot where you can better manage not only the training that you're doing, but everything else in your life too.
That's a really good point, especially when people are transitioning to work from home now. I mean, our brains are really good at pattern recognition, right? So when you're at the office, there's a Pavlovian association there, right? Like, I'm in the office, it is time to be focused, do high level mental work. And so your sympathetic system is sort of your fight or flight system, and then your parasympathetic is your rest and digest. And we go back and forth between those at any given point during the day. So when you're really, really tuned in and focused, whether you're on the bike and training, that's like a physical input, but you can also be sort of in that sympathetic system through mental load as well, cognitive load, mental focus. And then when you come home from the office, walking into your front door, that can be an association that your body is like, oh, now is time to rest and digest. Now I can kind of let my hair down, so to speak. We don't have those kind of place-specific associations anymore, right? So a lot of the work that we're doing is bleeding into family life, is bleeding into home life, and it's all kind of getting mixed up into the same thing. So it's harder for us to sort of delineate, like, okay, this is work time, this is rest time. And as a result of that, probably what's happening is a lot of us are missing that parasympathetic recovery. So that's a really, really good point, John. And there's a lot of things you can do. One of the things I used to do when I was training is after I get off the bike, so first thing I do is have my recovery shake, and then I would lay down, or later in my career I actually had an inversion table, but I would lay down for 5 minutes, and I'd play the same song as a piece of classical music that I just found particularly enjoyable and soothing, and I would just do some really deep breathing and listen to that song, so that I created an association that would bring me down from sympathetic to parasympathetic within about 5 minutes. And it was the same song every time, specifically because I wanted to create a Pavlovian response. And it got to a point where I'd get off the bike, I'd have my recovery shake, I'd lay down, and the first few bars of that piece, boom, I would be super relaxed. And it took a while to create that quick Pavlovian response, but you can do similar things even if you're working from home. Carve out little pieces of your day. Maybe it's a piece of music, maybe it's a particular room, maybe it's going outside and sitting on the porch. Whatever it is, find something that you can create an association that's going to bring you down to that parasympathetic level so that you can get some recovery in your day, because man, we all need it, especially now.
Those associations tie, I think, far more strongly than we recognize to the tone that goes with them. Because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, but I was listening to one the other day, and he mentioned that think about how hard it is to when you're driving home from work to get yourself to the gym to do a workout. I mean, you're already half checked out, but if you can make yourself get to the gym, everything you associate with being at the gym turns you on. So you will get through that workout. Maybe it's not the greatest quality workout, but you're not going to get to the gym, turn around and go home. Mm-hmm. Once you're there, everything you associate with working out, and in this case, that's going to be sympathetic response, right? Everything gets a little wound up. You're committed to the task and you get it done. But we find ourselves in a position now where we come home and we have this mixed association now. Work's at home, social life's at home, everything that winds us up on a sympathetic level or winds us down on a parasympathetic is in the same location now. So it's really hard to differentiate.
Something interesting along those lines too, Chad, that I think all of us could probably deal with thinking about this is, have you all experienced this where you have a really hard workout and it's scheduled for that day, and it makes you it gives you like race nerves almost, like you're like nervous about it. And when you think about it all day, it makes it so much more likely, I've found, to not do that workout. Whereas if I have it on the calendar, I know it's coming, and then I'm just committed to the schedule and I have that schedule in place, once I show up, I will do that workout, right? But I just need to make sure I'm there. And when I think about it the whole day like that, it's a lot harder to get to the point of actually doing the workout. Kind of like to your point, once you're at the gym, you're fine, you can do it, it's all set forward. So even though we may not be able to separate ourselves physically from where we need or to do all of these activities, and to be like, okay, on the bike, train time, at home time, at the office, work time, even though we may not be able to do that, we do still have some control and maybe even more control over our schedules to a certain degree. And in that respect, we can still have these separation points. So at the very least, really, because the separation is key. If we can't change the location, at least we can make sure that we are blocking our time like that. And that can really help.
If they're not in place, we have to invent them. We have to give ourselves those differentiating points to say the workday ends here, the social life ends here. And when it starts up again.
Right. So to tie this back to the question of, hey, I have all this extra time, how do I add more volume? Let's think about the fact that, your sympathetic parasympathetic balance is probably pretty out of whack right now. And so maybe one of the best things you can do with that extra time is to dip into that parasympathetic. Give it a shot, see how you feel. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody, right? Everybody's situation is a little bit different. Some people are going to get a lot out of getting that extra volume. I have no problem with that. Like I said the other day, I did my intervals and I jumped into Pettit with the rest of the group, and it was a great way to get some extra volume. I loved it. But keep in mind, we still need to maintain that balance, and that balance is part of what's going to make you faster.
Let's jump into April's question. She says, hey, coaches, I love the podcast and especially love that you are now having Amber on. She's such a great addition.
Thank you.
Awesome. She says, I'm a relatively new triathlete and absolutely love the sport. I've been athletic in one form or another my whole life, but I think I've found my passion with triathlon. That's cool. That's super common. Triathlon is an adult onset sport, right? I know a lot of kids do it too, but it's kind of unique in that regard. in the sense that like it's not common to see a bunch of kids doing triathlon. So, okay, says, I don't have a trainer or anything you need to ride indoors, but with all the craziness going on, it looks like I'm finally going to need to bite the bullet and get set up to train inside. So my question, what do you recommend I get? I have a small Cervelo P3 and live in an apartment, if that makes any difference.
It does.
Yes, that does. In which ways, Nate, that come to mind?
So because you're in an apartment, the noise of the floor could, like the noise of the trainer, could make a big difference. And there's two really quiet trainers. One is the 4Eyes Flight. That's like pretty much silent, but you need you can't have a carbon rear wheel. You need like a metal rear wheel. And the other one is the Tax Neo. That one is extremely quiet too and low vibrations. Both of those are very good for in an apartment option. Two different price options, price levels too. So I would recommend either one of those. You probably don't want an old kicker or wheel-on kicker, one of the older, anything like that, because you'll get like a vibration, and that vibration, if you don't have nice neighbors, they could be complaining, and then you just can't use that trainer anymore, which is no fun.
My brother just had that happen. He lives in an apartment, and the tricky thing is now a lot of people like you used to just like maybe not train during the evening or something, like when everybody was home. But now since everybody's home during the day and probably working, it's kind of hard. Like, so it's definitely something to consider. My wife has the Neo 2, and I know they have the Neo 2T, which I think is even quieter. But Sarah, all I hear is Sarah's drivetrain when she's on that bike. And if you touch the trainer, it actually doesn't have any like vibration going on. It's pretty crazy. Like if you touch
That's
down
impressive.
by the feet. Yeah. So yeah, really good tip on that. Also, the one thing though with the Cervelo P3, if it's a small, some TT bikes can be really tough to fit, especially on the Tax Neo in particular, because the chain stays, and I'm using my hands here, and I realize that a lot of you are listening to this and not watching on YouTube, but the chain stays are pretty beefy on triathlon bikes. They tend to be pretty big, and increasingly more so on all bikes. So a lot of the time it's tougher for them to clear the body of the trainer because it kind of extends pretty far forward. So that's one thing. If you can, and I know it's really tough right now because you probably can't go to a bike shop, but scour the internet and see what other people have done maybe for your specific bike, just to see if that is a potential issue. I think, or I know that Tax with the first Neo, it was bigger, and then they narrowed it down intentionally for that very thing to try to make it so that it was more compatible with more bikes. So you may be fine, but it's worth considering.
Yeah, and I would just, you just email Tax. They'll tell you right away. Yeah,
your bike shop may also even know. A lot of bike shops are still open, and you can just give them a call and see if they've had any experience with it too.
So that's like that's more of a high budget option, and I figure this is probably a good opportunity for us to talk about like low, mid-level, and high budget setups that you could do for indoor training, since a lot of people are now that are listening to this or that haven't trained indoors are now going through that whole process of what do I get, and it can be overwhelming because there's so many trainers. Like you have a ton of choice. So yeah,
I have strong opinions on this.
Where do you want to start with this, Nate?
Let's start with one thing: is getting a power meter. Like a lot of people are like, I need to be in erg mode. Erg mode is a luxury in some cases, but other cases, I like to not be in erg mode. John actually just uses rollers, so if you have a choice between a power meter that you can use indoors and outdoors or an erg trainer inside, choose that power meter every time first. Like that's very important.
Completely agree.
I think we're all in agreement with that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really not that hard to. So at first when you get a power meter, you'll be like, wow, the numbers are more bouncy than I thought. You'll get used to that. You'll add 5-second power smoothing, something like that. It'll start to stabilize, and you'll actually be able to hit your power targets with the same precision that you would without erg with time. Like it's for me, when I finish and I get my interval summary on TrainerRoad, they are no more correct or incorrect with whether I'm using erg or not. So you can still get in the same quality workout. Like you said, Nate, it can be a luxury at times, like especially if you're like doing a low intensity workout and watching something or getting caught up in the conversation with your friends during group workouts, something like that. It can be a luxury just to not have to worry about matching your power target, but you can still absolutely do it and get the same quality, get just as fast without erg.
So the next, so if you have that, and then I would recommend a fluid trainer, and two that we really like are the Kinetic Road machine or the Cyclops Jet Fluid Pro. And a lot of people, if they got like a smart trainer, those might be easy to get on like Craigslist for very inexpensive, because they're just sitting in people's houses. So that's a good option. If you can't, if you can only afford one of those and you want to train inside, we also have virtual power. And for that, the best slope that we have would be the Kinetic row machine. That thing's, and the jet fluid plug. Both of those are very, very stable. So if you don't have if you can't afford a power meter and you just want to get going with training inside, you can use virtual power. Keep everything set up. You can't compare your numbers to other people, but you can have precision. So between workouts, it can be the same numbers, and you can train just like you had a power meter, but not outside for the cheapest. And for that, what you need is a speed sensor. And there's Garmin or other Bluetooth speed sensors, pretty cheap right now. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. Next stage up. Go ahead.
Just for all our talk, you might get the impression that we think everyone needs a wheel-off smart trainer, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Because for the longest time, I rode a road machine and then the rock and roll version of it. I absolutely loved that trainer. Mm-hmm. We've gravitated since then toward the smart trainers, but they are not by any means the only solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for most of my career, I was on a Kinetic road machine.
They feel so good. They still feel like the feel of them in terms of like when you're spinning, the inertia, everything else. They still feel better than many smart trainers. They may not have the control, but they feel better. So, yep.
And then for like inexpensive power meter, single side, Stages and 4-eyes are good options. 4-eyes just did a price lowering like yesterday. So they're like Stages and 4-eyes are going back and forth with lowering prices. So as a consumer, you're pretty stoked on that. And I believe even right now, 4-eyes is still doing factory install. So you can send them, they send you like a little shipping thing, and then you send them the crank, and then they install a power meter and you get it back. So that's pretty cool. And then
one thing on that really quick, Nate, I actually put that on my on my SB 150, my mountain bike. And one thing to know with this is that they can install it on drive or non-drive. And when you contact them about doing a factory install, they'll instruct you on finding out which one is better. In our minds, we think like we would never want it it's always on the non-drive is like what's in our minds, but it's no more difficult for them to install it on drive or non-drive. And depending on your application, it might be better. So for me, on my mountain bike, I couldn't fit it on the non-drive. And they have me check by basically taking a AAA battery and seeing if I could fit that AAA battery in between my frame and my crank arm. And if I couldn't, then I shouldn't put the power meter on that side. And I couldn't do it on the non-drive, but I could on the drive. So anyways, it's a really cool option too. Not only is it really accessible in terms of price, but it's cool because if you have like a tricky situation with trying to get a power meter on, that can be a flexible option.
And then for the high, like the smart trainer stuff, okay, I'll probably get flack from companies from saying this, but I'm just going to say it. Go for the high end. At this moment of this recording, there's trade-offs of getting a smart trainer that's mid-range. Like the high end is better, and I would either like save up for that or just go for the fluid trainer, the quote dumb trainer, then get a mid-range that you might not be happy with long term. I personally hate buying things twice. You ever buy like a tool and then you use it and then it doesn't work how you want it, and you buy another tool that's better later and you just end up buying it twice? That is like, to me, in my mind, I just can't stand that. So that is where I'm coming from. And for the high budget ones, Chad and I like the H3. Like that is the trainer that I use all the time.
That one's popular around the office in general. That seems like right now it's one that people really love.
That trainer.
I know, and I can't believe it's not more popular in the market because I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's got the huge flywheel, so it just feels like riding outside. There's the H2. And the difference between the two of those is the H3 is quieter. So
it's impressively quiet.
Yeah, but if you don't have an option or an issue with like quiet, if you can find an H2 right now, that is the deal. That's a very cheap deal. High-end kicker, good choice too. Neo, really like that one. And then Jonathan, you've been using the Elite Nero rollers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're pretty darn good. They have. We're actually going to build some specific things for them, and it's something that people don't know. Nate probably is that we actually build in some cases specifically for specific smart trainers. Like so, we understand that. For example, like the Saurus H3, because every smart trainer, when you start an interval, for example, they tend to lag a little bit, right? And then it brings your power up. So we know that certain trainers take a little bit.
You're giving away our secrets. Nice. It's okay. I'm joking.
Okay, yeah.
I've said this before online.
Okay,
and John's
cool.
like, oh, we'll cut this out.
What am I supposed to do? But
I've never stopped you cold like that.
I know. Yeah, that's what it was a shock. But the thing about that is that we've built specifically for specific trainers to give like a better experience. So I'm going to be working with our team to build specifically for the Neros. But I really like rollers a lot, and they sucked at first, and everything was really hard, and I felt like I couldn't hit my power targets. It was really tricky, and I just did them kind of on the side for fun for a bit, and then I got to the point where that cognitive load completely went away, and I don't think of it anymore, except for when I almost fall off in the middle of the DC Rainmaker live stream. But I don't think of it anymore. And as a result, I find that like there's a lot of benefits to them, and we've talked about it before, but they've never had smart control. And I know a lot of people just want smart control in one regard, erg, basically. And these are the first ones that do it. And they do it really well. In my experience of riding this and then riding the Diretto, I think that might be the highest end elite trainer right now. Both of those, they perform almost exactly the same, which kind of makes sense because I'm sure that they use similar hardware, similar firmware. So I like them a lot. It is a high-end option, though. They're not cheap. I want to say they're like over $1,000. So it's not a cheap option, but if you're looking for something unique with erg, that's one. For sure.
And then for power meters, the best resource is to go to DC Rainmaker, and he has a roundup, and like there's pros and cons to every power meter and like price, and it's updated. So just go to his article. He does a big rundown, and I mean, he is a legit trusted journalist. I would just go to him. We even look at what he says too. So that's my recommendation for power meters.
Absolutely. So this is a work from home scenario right now. I apologize. A printer just woke up next to me, and if it's making a bunch of noise, I'm so sorry. We're all in this together. So for all of us too, along those lines too, with power meters, Nate, I think it's fair to say that like power meters themselves, like it's not like one is like, oh, this one has like, we've talked about it before, like left-right balance. So this one is way worth it in terms of like spending a lot more money on it because it has these little things. In my mind, it's all just as long as it's consistent. That's the main thing. And when you look at things like Garmin, if you look at the PowerTap P1 pedals, Favero Asioma pedals, then Quarks, Stages, 4Eyes, like Power 2 Max, like the known brands, I think that we've all had pretty good experiences across the board with those. So
yep.
If you go for something obscure on Kickstarter, I don't know if that'll work or not. So last question. This one's from Horacio. It says, I keep dropping sweat from my helmet to my cycling sunglasses, no matter the type of helmet or sunglasses I've been trying. He says, I've tried a cycling hat under the helmet, and it helps, but I would like to know if you have any other tips from that are different from using just a cycling cap, not like the one I'm wearing right now, but an actual cycling cap. Horacio says, I'm a sweaty mountain biker from Mexico, so probably really hot conditions, and I use an open face helmets for XC and also an open face for Enduro. Thanks for all the valuable info you share in your podcast, and keep up the good work. So sweat management. First things first, and Chad, I only say this because you have a haircut that might not work very well with sweat wicking. It might cause it to bead down.
Yeah.
So you've probably dealt with this in a lot of ways. What do you do to manage the sweat, whether indoors or out?
Yeah, because if I'm outdoors, I'm wearing sunglasses, and if I'm indoors, I'm usually wearing glasses. So it's pretty simple. Either a skull cap. I'm not real big on sweatbands. Some people can pull it off. I don't think I'm one of them. And then
You can.
You got it, Chad.
I want to see it. Wear one on the beer podcast.
I want to see
Yeah, just wait till the end of Beers with Chad, and then
I gotta work up to that.
Frat bro Chad. Like I just want to see like the sweatband. Sorry, Chad, we threw you off.
That's okay. Yeah. Cycling caps work too. Even regular caps, as long as they breathe. Anything that grabs the sweat. And then for the body, I guess base layers. I don't know if we're talking about body, but the concern, I guess, with base layers is that they do wick, and sometimes it's nice to have that layer of sweat on your body, especially if you're. Lately, I've been postponing the fan until the first interval ends, so I build up a good sweat. I get warm first, and then I build up a good sweat. And the first interval is kind of hard because of it, battling the heat in addition to the challenge of the interval itself. And then I get through the recovery valley, and then I turn the fan on for the next one, and you get that cool blast that is probably the closest thing I'll ever experience to an ice bath. It's quite a jolt, but it's also pretty invigorating too. Yeah. So I think base layers have their place, especially in the context of group rides where you don't want to maybe expose yourself.
One thing along these lines to this point that like it's not just your head, but if you can lower your core temperature in general, that is going to stop your body or hopefully slow the sweat rate that's going on at that point. Hopefully that's the concept, right? But I think in thinking of ways that we do handle it even outside as well with this, one thing that I used to do with motocross back in the day, because you're wearing so much heavy stuff and you're basically straddling a campfire, which is like on a motorcycle, right? So a lot of heat and you're in hot conditions and working really hard. So you sweat a lot, and they have goggles, and those goggles have foam that press against your forehead, like right on above your brow line, basically. And when that happens, that sweat or that foam can get saturated with sweat, and then it turns into like a fog machine for your goggles, and everything gets dangerous and terrible. So they do a lot of things for that. I've even seen people, and I know that this is for goggles, and Horacio, you mentioned that you do enduro, so I don't know if you use goggles with your half shell helmet at times too, but if you are a goggle user, one thing that I have seen people do is actually take like maxi pads and cut out a strip of the maxi pad, and then they just glue that or like stick that to the top of their goggles, and they are way more absorbent than the standard foam that you have. It's that's where the tech has gone. It has not gone into our goggles. That's amazing. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So and it can help a lot if you're doing that. Now clearly, if you have glasses, it'd look a little weird if you just had a maxi pad on your forehead. So, but once again,
it's
no
a judgment-free zone. Yeah,
judgment-free zone, man.
So one thing that I actually did was I actually would use Vaseline and put it just across the strip of my forehead, which probably didn't help with teenage acne, but like putting that across the forehead right there kind of created like a visor for the sweat, so that it pushed over to the side of my head rather than dripping down straight onto the bridge of your nose or anything else like that. And that kind of goes with glasses. We've seen glasses change. Most glasses, it seems like these days, kind of arc all the way up to the center of your in the center point of the glasses rather than dipping down. Like if you go look at like Lance Armstrong era pictures of cycling, glasses definitely dipped down in the center up at the top of the bridge, but now they don't. And I wonder how much of that is aesthetic, and I wonder how much of it is because of not basically channeling sweat directly down in the center and hopefully trying to channel it more out to the side. And I think Oakley even makes some gigantic like horse blinder, horse mask glasses with foam across the top, I think for that specific reason, right? I don't know if any of you have seen those.
I thought it was to keep the wind out, but it might be also for sweat.
Yeah, so it might be both of those. Anything else that any of us have done or that we do to manage sweat?
I have kind of it's an outdoor solution, although, there are occasions where you might wear a helmet indoor if you're trying to check, your view and see if your helmet lines up with your body when you're in aero position, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But this is mostly for outdoors. The sweat pads in your helmets, well, they're aptly named. They do accumulate sweat. So they can lend themselves to kind of a steady drip onto your sunglasses. So every once in a while, on particularly sweaty rides, I'll take my glasses off, lean forward, push my helmet against my forehead, and it's a torrent. I mean, there's quite a lot of fluid. And then put my glasses back on.
That's never possible for me. I've tried so hard. I'm like pressing. I'm like, maybe I need to press harder. And I just...
No, it's very possible for me.
Yeah.
I forgot. Like, you remember when we were in Kona and we walked by that guy who was like cleaning glasses?
Yes.
Yeah, so I bought this stuff, and I just bought this retail. We have no association with them, but it's called, I don't know if you can see it, Z-Clear. It's zclear.com. But I got two of these things. They're like $15 each, but they're probably going to last me about 30 years. And you put this coating on your glasses, and then you rub them off, and it surprisingly like doesn't fog up, and then sweat rolls off it a lot easier instead of getting like stuck. It's like a little, I don't know, like a little Rain-X coating almost on your glasses.
Yeah, Rain-X does the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it is
amazing.
Is it anti-fog or is it like anti-sweat specifically? Does it say or anything?
I don't know. It just makes them awesome. And you put them in, they got a spray too. You put in goggles. I haven't used that yet, but I've put these on all of my glasses now, and I kind of reapply before bigger rides. And I've really, really, really liked it. So it's pretty inexpensive also.
And you can usually find anti-fog stuff at any sort of water sports or snow sports store or any sort of sporting goods. And that definitely helps too. It's like that. It's basically like a hydrophobic coating that ends up going on.
I don't know about you, Amber, but swimming growing up, that anti-fog spray never, ever, 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 ever worked. Ever.
No.
Ever.
When I was in college, I was studying marine science, and we used to do diving. And so to keep our scuba masks clear, we would actually wipe the inside of the mask with kelp leaves, which was surprisingly effective.
Crazy.
Wow.
Is it just oil in general that it needs? I wonder.
I don't know. I don't think it was oil with the kelp leaves. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
you should probably know that.
It's definitely something to do. I'm pretty curious too. Everybody listening to this is probably smarter than me on many things, but also on this. One of the things, does anybody know if ceramic coating glasses using if anybody has used automotive ceramic coating, the stuff is amazingly expensive and also amazingly effective. But when you use that, it's incredible how much water just doesn't even adhere. Like, I don't even use my windshield wipers ever. Like, I just drive, and water, as soon as it touches that surface, it just disappears. It just like rolls right off.
Yeah.
That might be it. I've never, it might harm like the coating on the glasses. I wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
if anybody has insight on that, I might try to ceramic coat my glasses, because that would be really helpful.
I know with that stuff, it gets wiped off easily. So like with a car wash, if it's touch, it can. So if you're wiping your glasses, that could do it. Mm-hmm. Another pro tip, Chad did this in Hawaii, is those little lens wipes you can get. They're really cheap. He had one in his pocket, and we were riding sweaty in the middle of the ride. He's like, "Hey, you want this?" And I cleaned it off, and that is so cool.
I remember hearing you in the back. You're like, "I can see."
Yeah, it's amazing. But not to plug this Z-Clear stuff more, but I'm telling you, Jonathan, you should try this.
Yeah.
And you can. I bet you'll be happy.
Yeah, one of the
cool.
things that you can do too, if you have the luxury, Horacio, of going over and like testing out glasses, even though like a certain one looks really cool and everybody might be using that sort of, like right now it seems like the Oakley Sutro, like everybody has them, which beside Pete, by the way, which is hilarious because they fly off his face because they're so large anytime he turns sideways, which is pretty funny. But just because everybody else uses them doesn't mean that you should use them. Like, you should go out and test glasses and see how they fit, because having glasses that sit away from your face a little bit, and I don't mean pushing them down on the bridge of your nose, but just the shape of them, that will alleviate or introduce some space in between your forehead and the glasses, can be super helpful. Because then if your sweat is coming down and it's going onto your face, you have these crazy sweat management systems called eyebrows built into your face, right? And they end up a lot of the time taking your sweat and moving it around the outside of your head. But if you have glasses that it's going onto the glasses, then it doesn't even matter, right? So maybe you can find some glasses that sit away from the brow of your head a bit more, and that can be super helpful as well.
Yeah, so good call. I'm glad I'm in my office because I can grab all my stuff. So these glasses here from Oakley, they have this little channel here on the nose, and producer Tucker will put in the name of it, but you pop this channel and it pushes the nose piece in so it sits far away. It's to stop fogging when you're climbing, but also if you're just in general, because I have that same problem. I have big bushy eyebrows and they would touch on these glasses, but if I opened it up, they'd be fine. But if you just do that, if you're descending, it might let more wind in depending on how your face is shaped, so know that. But that's another option to try.
Yeah, for sure. Not all glasses are created equal. I'm sure, Amber, you switched glasses at some point throughout your career, like with sponsorships. And
oh yeah, every year pretty much.
Yep. And all of us that are listening, or not all of us, but a good chunk of us that are listening to this aren't required to wear a certain brand of sunglass, right? So it's definitely something you should try out and see where they sit on your head. It makes a huge difference. I also yeah, go ahead, Nate.
I would say borrow a friend's sunglasses, because some of these cycling sunglasses, like, they're all expensive, sometimes crazy expensive. So if you can just ask a friend, I guess right now you would sanitize it first, but then do that for a ride. And I bet your friends will let you do that and then buy them. Don't just buy them.
Yeah, I agree. And the final thing with that too is, like, I know the trend is to get gigantic glasses right now. Like, they're just getting larger and larger. We're all going to have like face shields at some point.
Jonathan hates it, just so you guys know.
Especially with COVID, right?
I still have them. I still use them. I use some of the big ones at times. So, but if you do have those, I like that can be really tricky if you have sweat issues, just because a lot of the time they sit so far up your head and then so far down, they can really trap a lot of airflow. So it's definitely, if you have airflow and then if you have a gap in between your forehead and the glasses, those things can really help with managing the sweat. Finally, grow a lot of hair, and then that hair is like a sponge and it will start to absorb the sweat before it starts dripping down your head. So unless, Chad, I'm sorry. But yeah, for most of us, grow a lot of hair and it'll work. So That covers it for this week. We had some issues with the live stream, so we don't have any live questions that were submitted. We're sorry, but we will get to them next week. You can submit them at trainerroad.com/podcast. Keep doing that. We absolutely love it. You should head over to trainerroad.com and check out group workouts. It's super cool. And if you are a TrainerRoad subscriber and an athlete using it, then man, give it a shot. Let us know if you want to train. Go over to trainerroad.com/forum.
Another thing we didn't mention, we should have at the top, but we forgot. Plan Builder is now in the desktop, which is really cool. So you can use Plan Builder in the Mac and PC apps.
Which is huge for reorganizing all of our plans right now since, races and things are changing. You can use Plan Builder as much as you want. That server will stack up. So make that thing smoke. Do whatever you want and keep working through it. And that's it for us this week. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hang in there through these crazy times, and we will talk to you all next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.